Hi, everybody. Ron Schara here with another edition of a Minnesota Bound podcast, and thank you for joining us. I hope I've got some ruffed grouse listeners, hunters, enthusiasts listening today, because that's what the subject is. And I'm talking to a guy who knows all about Minnesota's ruffed grouse. In fact, he gets paid to know all about them. Ted Dick with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Ted, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ron. It's great to talk to you. It's been a while, so I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to start off this way, and that is, I'm going to make a couple of statements. You can tell me if I'm all wet here, but I think we Minnesotans tend to take our ruffed grouse hunting for credit, and I think we don't understand that Minnesota is probably one of the best ruffed grouse hunting states in the United States, just like South Dakota likes to claim it's a pheasant capital, but we don't claim being the grouse capital. Maybe we ought to. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I've been advocating that for years. I agree completely. Having grown up hunting in northern Minnesota for years and years, it's my favorite thing to do, and I've hunted other places, but there is no place better than Minnesota. If there's something we can literally claim number one, it's ruffed grouse hunting, and that's evident this month. You know, the Ruffed Grouse Society has their annual event, and this is probably around the 40th or something, and for 40 years they come here because it's the most public land and the best grouse hunting there is in the 48 states, so we should be proud of that.
You know, that came home to roost with me when I took professional golfer Tom. Oh my, losing it here.
Weiskopf? I'm trying to think of golf.
Tom Weiskopf. It was Tom Weiskopf. Yeah, thank you. Took him. I don't know how it happened that I was his grouse hunting guide, but I took him just north of Anoka, 20, 30, 40 miles, and he and another guy and myself, we went to ruffed grouse hunting. And I don't remember how many birds we got. It wasn't, we weren't stacking them up, but I think we flushed one afternoon. We had 24 flushes. And most grouse hunters, they count their flushes just like a musky fisherman counts his fallows, so to speak. Yep. And when we got done, Weiskopf turned to me. He lived in Ohio at that time, and he was an avid ruffed grouse hunter in Ohio. He said, Ron, I want you to know the 24 flushes today represents what I might flush in an entire hunting season in Ohio. I go, really? We kind of took it for granted. So I'll never forget that story. Yep. But Ted, why is Minnesota such a great ruffed grouse hunting state? Let's start there.
Well, it's a couple things, maybe three things. Our climate is conducive. Ruffed grouse they do best. They're sort of northern type of birds. So if you're north of Ohio, say northern Minnesota and things, we have winters and weather and snow that they're well evolved to handle and adapted to. So that's part of it. And then we have an abundance of public land and vibrant timber industry and land management agencies that appreciate aspen and a lot of time manage for aspen. So, when they talk about grouse, they talk about early successional forests or disturbed forests, and we really have those here. It varies over time, but currently we still have the very best habitat in the 48 because we have lots of it, lots of public land, and it's managed for pulp and it's managed for timber, and that produces those young early successional forests that grouse really do well in. So it's those things all play into it.
I think a lot of people, we always talk about deer habitat improvements, but a lot of people don't realize that when you are manipulating popple, etc., for deer, you're also aiding ruffed grouse as well.
Yeah, I didn't mention it before you called, but I got promoted recently, so I do forest habitat in general now, and I'm not single species focus on the grouse only stuff. So we do a lot of deer planning and deer management, and our managers working in conjunction with DNR Forestry and other agencies, we really make an effort to make sure we have the right age class diversity and the right mix of those young forests and old forests, because yeah, both white-tailed deer and ruffed grouse need some younger forest in the mix to get that high density, high quality browse for the deer, and high quality brood protection with those thick broomstick size regenerating stands for the grouse. Those are important, but both of them also need some older forest component too, you know, for winter cover, some thermal cover. You know, grouse like to hide in the balsams and the understory conifers when the snow isn't as deep in the winter, and just for protection from predators. So deer management and grouse management are similar with some subtle differences, but they work well together on our public lands and private lands in Minnesota.
Well, that said, let's look at this current ruffed grouse hunting season. Started in September, mid-September. I always referred to the grouse opener, which I went to many times, as basically hear a grouse opener.
Yep.
Because the leaves were so thick, you'd hear them go away.
Yep.
And that was about it. What's it look like in a nutshell for hunters who are still thinking about it, or who have been out there trying to roust a grouse or two? What's your data show?
Well, the good thing is, you know, depending on when people listen to the podcast or when it's going to air, there's still plenty of time left. And when you talk about grouse openers and grouse season compared to, say, pheasant openers or deer hunting openers, yeah, grouse hunters like to get out there early on, but they know it's going to get better later on, mostly because the leaves come down. And so the opener isn't the best. Like when people rush to get to the walleye opener, some, you know, they think that's the time to get them. They haven't been fished in a while, and now's it. But with grouse, right, it's sort of a warm up, and it's a listening, and it's sort of a tune up, a shakedown cruise sort of thing to get your dog in order and make sure you remember all your stuff and all that, because you know once it gets further into October, it's going to be better. But so far, with my experience and talking to my friends and people, it's been pretty good. A decent number of flushes and decent number of success. One example, my brother, who I don't know if I trust him with everything or anything because he's related to me, but I do trust him on grouse counts. He works a lot, so he doesn't get to go a lot, but he has a young poodle pointer, his first hunting dog, so it's fun to keep track and try to screw up his training and his dog planning. But he went to one of our favorite spots last Sunday, and he got on, in one walk in a couple hours, he got on more than 25 ruffed grouse. And you know, I'm starting to hedge his report down a little bit because it sort of sounds unbelievable. And I think the quote he gave me was 30 flushes in the 2.5 hour walk, and a couple of those were big broods, but it still shows you that grouse hunting's still good, and if you're in the right spot, it can be a ton of action and a lot of fun.
Has the interest in grouse hunting gone up, down, stayed the same? I ask that because two things. One, we're going to talk about the cycle of grouse, but a lot of deer ticks wherever you go now in the woods, and when it's still reasonably fall out, the deer ticks are still out there in big numbers, and they represent a threat for Lyme disease, etc. So going back to my question is, have you seen a decline in grouse hunters at all?
Yeah, we have, and that's a cause for concern for us. Not, people say, oh, you're just, DNR is just concerned about selling a license, but it's not that. It's about the hunting tradition and the amount of time and priority that wildlife managers, other land managers are allowed to put into it. If there's fewer people out there, you're going to have less opportunity or less direction to focus on things. I use the example, I like to hunt snipe with my dog too, but there's probably only about 15 of us, or rails. And if you don't have the support it's a bigger deal. We have a lot of deer hunters, and so deer management is an easier thing to accomplish these days because we've got a lot of public support. But yeah, I just saw some small game hunter survey information from last year, and our numbers stayed the same, but they're down about a third in the 10 years I've been around doing this.
Wow. It's interesting. I just finished talking with the Iowa pheasant biologist and about Iowa's ups and downs with pheasants. And he was telling me that at one time, not many years ago, they had 100,000 hunters, pheasant hunters, and now they're down to 40,000. And there are several reasons for that, but just probably the same concerns you have. The ruffed grouse has a very famous cycle, population cycle, 7 or 10 years. I forget what the current
10,
scientific explanation is. Is it 10 years?
Yeah, approximately.
I've heard some people start to poo-poo that because they said, well, it was supposed to be real low, and I ran into a lot of grouse. Is that still the scientific doctrine, the 10-year cycle?
I don't know if I'd call it doctrine, but it's yeah. When you look at the 70 years that they've been doing the surveys, I mean, it's pretty easy to see a rise and fall pattern that reaches a peak about every 10 years and sort of a super peak every other one of those, so about every 20 years. But I mean, there's nothing, there's no doctrine about that. It's not written in stone. And other northerly species, snowshoe hares, and some other game species with those kind of reproductive potential in the northern part of their range show similar patterns. And yeah, for years with ruffed grouse, it was pretty predictable. But sometimes those cycles, we say they sort of decay over time. There's nothing saying it's always been that way. Who knows what the reasons are, but they don't necessarily last forever. And our grouse cycle lately, it's tough to say because in hindsight you can kind of see, but when you're looking at it, this year, last year, it's tough to discern the pattern very well. But in 2017, we were supposed to be usually the peaks in the cycle are a year that ends in 8 or 9 approximately. So that's easy to remember when you're not looking at the chart. So 2018 or 2019 should have been about a peak. But in 27, we had a fairly dramatic upswing according to our data. But looking at that later, I think it was more an anomaly in the reporting and the data that, it was up 54%. And I told people to don't go out in the woods alone, get more ammo, buy a dog because it's not safe because the grouse will be fighting back. There's so many of them. And that didn't pan out. So I lost all credibility that year. But
Yeah.
digging through the data, it looks like some of the weighting of some of those individual surveys, there might have been an issue there. So I don't think it should have been as high as the result we came up with that year. But I'm not one of the research people. I'm just someone who promotes the data once we get it. So yeah, the cycles are still in play in the northern part of the range and in the northern latitude states. But I definitely don't take that for granted. I hope they continue, and they have somewhat, but this last round was a little bit questionable, and I'd be anxious to see the next one to see if we get a good peak.
Hey there, Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. You know what? It's time to relax, and Voyager can help. Voyager builds custom saunas for your home, backyard, business, and you know what? The pick of the Shirk family, we love Voyager's mobile saunas that go anywhere we want to go. Clear grade cedar benches, spray foam insulation, Kuma wood-fired stoves, or Hilo electric heaters. These are Finnish-influenced hand-built saunas that will last a lifetime. They're constructed with care by the hometown Voyagers team. The Shirk family loves our Voyager mobile sauna. Voyager, a Minnesota movement influenced by Finnish culture. Visit VoyagerSaunas.com and get ready to distress. Trust me, it works.
Hi, I'm Laura Schara, and did you know that a propane gas furnace lifespan averages 20 years, while electric heat pumps only last 14 years? And propane furnaces work in all temperatures while delivering warm and consistent heat to your home. Why buy two heating systems when one propane furnace can do it all? It lasts longer, works better, and it costs less. These things and more are done with propane today. The right energy right now.
And North Dakota Tourism. Start planning your fall hunt in North Dakota at legendarynd.com. You know, North Dakota is home to more than 800,000 plots hunting acres. That is private land that landowners open to public hunting. And the plots guides, they show you exactly where all this secret land sits. Right now, North Dakota's ringneck pheasant crowing counts are up 15% this year. That is really good news. The state is also home to an estimated 2.9 million breeding ducks. North Dakota, it is an absolute outdoor oasis just waiting. Plan your trip and bag your limit this fall in North Dakota. Visit legendarynd.com.
Well, I had the privilege of knowing and going into the woods with Gordon Gullion, who is, you know the name, he's Mr. Ruffed Grouse researcher. He studied that cycle for umpteen years, I mean, maybe a half a century, and concluded that he couldn't figure out what caused it necessarily. He would see signs that sometimes the gray phase or the red phase, and he had all kinds of little theories, but nothing he could put his finger on. And, you know, as you think about that, I guess that's okay. Nature is entitled to keep some of her actions mysterious, I would say.
Yep.
But I'll never forget, we're walking through the woods, and had been snow on the ground, not a lot, but 3-4 inches. And he was showing me something. I think he noticed, for example, that ruffed grouse in the winter were feeding on the male buds of a popple, and they were going up in this one set of trees, but the buds were getting kind of thinned out. There was another set of trees over yonder that was all kinds of buds there, but the grouse were not going there. And so he got, being a classical scientist, he gathered buds from both trees and had them analyzed by the University of Minnesota. And lo and behold, the buds that the grouse were feeding on had higher nutrients than the ones they were ignoring. So how in the hell they knew that, I'll never know. But that's the kind of stuff. But anyway, we're walking in the woods, and I said, Gordon, you know, I can't say I've ever seen a drumming log that I knew was a drumming log. He says, well, let's see. He looked around and he says, well, there's a log over there. I think that's a drumming log. And he said, if it is, he'd be drumming from this end of the log. And he walked to that end of the log, swept the snow off with his mittens, and underneath the snow was all kinds of bird droppings. So I was very impressed. He knew what end of the log they would drum for. But I'm off the topic here. But were you able to spend any time with him?
I was going to say, Dr. Gullion, a very smart man, and he did a lot of groundbreaking research. And we still use his recommendations and his direction in management every day. You know, when we talk about small block management and having different age classes of poplar, aspen in close proximity to one another. I was still working on some of that this morning. So what he did in the 60s and 70s still holds true. But I always think it's pretty neat that when you talk about his stuff, you know, they used to do reports on his opinions on ruffed grouse in Sports Illustrated back then. I still have electronic copies of some of them here, and to think of bird management in that type of magazine sort of shows that there was a different popularity back at the time. But the drumming grouse, we still have some people here that worked with them and met with them. We didn't overlap at the University of Minnesota much when I started there as a grad student, but I did get a scholarship, a Gordon Gullion scholarship back at the time when I was doing my goose research there. So that was my closest encounter, but his efforts and his research still guide a lot of what we do today. So a good man and a smart man.
I'm curious, you mentioned your new assignment added to forest management as far as in addition to grouse. Does DNR, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, do you have a program for private landowners who might wish to manipulate their forest for, let's say, ruffed grouse?
We do, and it's sort of interesting. It varies from year to year. I work in the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and a few years ago we had private lands biologists that did just that sort of thing. Jody Provost, if you've ever met her, she works out of the Aiken office, and sharp-tailed grouse, open lands, brushland, and then private lands management are sort of her specialties. And she was part of that group a few years ago. And we still have materials and things, and we're always happy to talk to people about it. But lately, the Division of Forestry has a team of people that can do more on the ground type things, and they're pretty well versed in grouse management, wildlife habitat management. I would say not as good as we are because we do it full time, but we do have resources and people we could put somebody in touch with. Say if you had 40 acres and wanted to pursue or enhance the potential for, say, deer or ruffed grouse or something else. But yeah, somewhere in our things, I just saw an internal notice that one of the recruiting firearms people, Craig Kiger, and some of the private lands people were going to do a seminar on managing your land for wildlife, particularly grouse. But if you if you are a landowner and contact one of the DNR private lands foresters, they would put you in touch with people that write stewardship plans for private lands, and so they'll help you harvest some of your wood, which is oftentimes good for ruffed grouse, depending on what you have there. And they can write you a plan that gives you some tax deductions and other benefits in addition to the habitat. And so that's the best way to go through DNR.
Thousand Hills lifetime grazed beef, grass-fed beef right here in Minnesota. You know, we make a career talking about clean water, native habitat, and some of the best environmental practices. That's exactly why I'm so excited about Thousand Hills. You know, it is locally raised beef done differently. You see, Thousand Hills uses what is called regenerative agriculture to raise their cattle. Those beef cows, they graze in fields of wild grasses, and they move between a lot of different fields of grass. It is a sustainable ecosystem free of synthetic fertilizers and chemical herbicides. It's a system of agriculture that promotes clean water, natural grasses, and the best beef you've tasted. It's beef raised the right way. You can check out Thousand Hills lifetime grazed grass-fed beef to understand their regenerative agricultural practices and fall in love with Thousand Hills beef. Do you know Connecticut? The Shirks, we love our Connecticut water. No secret. We live in the country and we have that ironclad well water. Well, we treat all of our water with the Connecticut whole home water treatment system. And we also use Connecticut's K5 drinking water system. You know that white buildup you get on the faucets at home? We've got none of that. Our dishes are squeaky clean and shiny. Katie also loves what Connecticut water does for both her hair and her skin, and the Shirk boys drink the absolute heck out of Connecticut water. They will not leave the house for school or for the hockey rink or for the soccer fields without filling their water bottles. What else do you have to say? Our water tastes great, and the foul smell is gone. Call Connecticut like the Shirks did and look forward to clean, safe water.
A couple more questions, then I'm going to let you go. We're talking with Ted Dick, DNR. I call him a Ruffed Grouse guru, but no, I just found out he has bigger titles than that. But we're visiting Ted Dick about the life and times of Ruffed Grouse in Minnesota. Ted, people ask me and talk to me about ruffed grouse hunting. One thing I never fail to say is it's the best eating bird in the wild. Now, I haven't eaten loons or bald eagles like you have, but I mean, that ruffed grouse just can't beat the breast of ruffed grouse.
No, you know, it's It's the perfect intro if you're dating someone who doesn't like the idea of eating wild game, if they only eat things at restaurants or from grocery stores. It's perfect because it's just, it's a fairly mild flavor, but it's definitely different than, say, chicken or other things. So yeah, there's nothing better as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I haven't eaten loon or eagle, but I have eaten rails and woodcock hunting. For those of us who like grouse hunting and have pointing dogs, woodcock are great too. And that's one that Dad made you eat if you shot one when you were a kid. But if you have the right recipe, they're really pretty spectacular and a fun hunting option. So yeah.
Well, you and I are going to have to disagree on that. I belong
Yep,
to a
that's
rough grouse
fine.
hunting group, and we said if you shoot a woodcock, you're going to eat it yourself. Because
See,
I'm not fond of worm night crawlers. I mean, you know what I mean? So
that's exactly what I was saying, and we hear that a lot. And for us, that's absolutely fine because that leaves more for the rest of us. Then the day the grouse hunting's slow, or if you're not shooting well, like right about now, you can go out and get on 40 or 50 woodcock flushes in an afternoon because they're migratory and they're fairly easy to pattern lately. So it really adds a lot of opportunity, and we like it that way, that other people don't like to eat them. But the interesting trivia, since you haven't eaten that many maybe, is the legs on a woodcock are the white meat. Since they're migratory birds, the breast meat is very dark. So we save the little drumsticks for a special party later on, and they're more like grouse or chicken, and it's sort of reverse that people don't know that. So
I was not aware of that. Not aware of that. One more thing, Ted. Over my years in the TV business, I've lost track, but we've had at least 4 or 5 incidents where people call us and say, "You got to come out and see this." It's a wild ruffed grouse that's acting like a pet dog. We've had them. The first one I ever ran into was a family that lived in the woods near Hudson, Wisconsin. When they started their riding lawnmower to mow the backyard, lo and behold, this ruffed grouse would come out of the woods and chase the lawnmower and hang out. And why is that? We couldn't. What's going on here? Well, then down the road, as the years went by, we'd had some others. There was a ruffed grouse that would fly up. This guy was shingling his cabin. The ruffed grouse would fly up there and sit next to him. And we had another one where this young couple would stop at a spot on their four-wheeler, sit there with the motor running, and the grouse would walk out of the woods, fly up onto the back of the ATV. They'd take him for a ride. They'd bring him back to where he got on, and he'd hop off and go back in the woods. Now, we filmed all this, so this is happening. And my last one, I went a couple years ago. This guy called me and said he had this ruffed grouse that would hang around with him in the deer stand. I go, really? And he explained the story. The first time it happened was 5-6 years ago, and so for 5 and 6 years, the same grouse has been hanging with him, which is awesome in itself, since their life cycle isn't 2 years. But he said the first time he was standing there in the dark, going to start the deer season, and he heard this rustling in the grass, and here comes this ruffed grouse. So he walked to his deer stand. The ruffed grouse followed him. He went up in the deer stand. The ruffed grouse flew up there with him and walked back and forth on his gun rest, and it started doing that for year after year during the deer season. And so we went out there with him, and sure enough, we rode out, and deer season was just over, but he was dressed like a deer hunter. We went out and stood there, and the grouse didn't show. Then suddenly it showed. I was expecting it wouldn't show, but anyway, showed up. He walked to his deer stand. That grouse went up there, hung around with him, flew over to a tree, flew back to him, and it was amazing. And here's the tip of this story, Ted. And I'm sorry, I asked the guy. I said, "Why do you think this? What do you think's going on here?" And he thought for a second. And he kind of teared up a little bit, and he says, "I think that ruffed grouse is my grandpa. My grandpa died during deer season. He's the one that introduced me to deer hunting." And I go, "You know what? Your theory is as good as mine, because I thought in some cases it's the thumping of a motor that attracted the grouse, because they thump as they're drumming. But so I share these with you, Ted, thinking you're going to have an answer for all this.
Well, I work for the DNR, so I can make up an answer for just about anything. So, but my current theory is we do hear that quite a bit, and we see evidence of it now with social media. And our theory is, male grouse, they're kind of either trying to avoid getting eaten, so they're sort of elusive, or they're looking for something to eat themselves, or then they're being territorial and trying to attract a mate at certain times of year. And, when people say they hear them drumming in the spring and the fall, that's more of a photo period deal. But yeah, when they're coming at you there, it's more fun and, it gives you a good feeling to think it's the reincarnation of a lost relative or something. And that's something I'd prefer to think. But in reality, they're just responding to something in their territory. And when they hear the thump, 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 sometimes that is an attractant because it sounds like drumming. It's a very similar sound. And so that will get them in the neighborhood. But when they get there, they're not trying to say, and I'm anthropomorphizing here a little bit, but they're not saying, feed me, or I want to be your friend and ride on your handlebars. For a small bird, that's about as aggressive as they can get, and they're trying to chase you out of their territory. They're trying to peck you a little bit to move you away because this is their spot. And so
interesting.
That's the big part of it.
This ruffed grouse he'd kind of purr a little bit when he was with that guy.
Yeah, so. I think that's just a low growl, and he's saying, if I were bigger, I'd show you who's boss. But people kind of tend to think, he's purring like a
well,
kid.
I can see even the grouse expert like Ted Dick is, wishing he had the solid answer to this, and so I don't either. And that's what I told the guy that when he thought that grouse was his grandpa. I said, your theory is just as good as mine.
Right.
So
I prefer that one too. Yeah, I agree.
Ted, thank you very much for joining us today, talking about ruffed grouse, one of my favorite birds. And one of these days, when I get my shooting eye back, I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to call you up and have you give me complete directions to your favorite grouse spot. Well,
I'd be happy to do that. And if you trust my directions, that's at your own peril. So keep that in mind. But no, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Ron. I appreciate it. And please call anytime. It's always fun.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Just a reminder, too, our sponsors for this edition of Minnesota Bound Podcast is Voyager Saunas, Connecticut, Minnesota Propane, North Dakota Tourism, Thousand Hills Beef, and my favorite bank, Star Bank. Thanks again for listening to the Minnesota Bound Podcast. And remember, introduce a kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Schara.